It wasn't the loud arguments, or the blatant lies, or even the strange, obvious glances that tipped me off. No, those things came later. It all started with a whisper, something so subtle, so small, that I almost didn't notice it. If I hadn't been paying close attention, I would have missed it completely. But I was paying attention. It started with a moment I'd never forget. I'd just come back from a long day at the office, my mind still tangled in spreadsheets and emails. I usually let myself unwind by heading straight to the couch, turning on a random show, and letting the noise of the television drown out the thoughts that refused to stop swirling in my mind. This particular night, however, Clara wasn't there. She wasn't waiting at the door with that smile she always wore when I walked in. The house was eerily quiet, and a strange emptiness hung in the air. I glanced at the clock, 7:45 p.m. We had always been in sync when it came to time. Dinner was usually at 8 p.m., and we'd spend the evening together, winding down before the madness of the next day began. I set my things down, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. The silence was unsettling, so I grabbed my phone to text her. "Hey, where are you?" I typed out, half expecting her to reply immediately, as she always did. But the response didn't come. It was unlike Clara to be out of touch for so long. So, I decided to call her. Twice. The first time, it rang out. The second time, the call went straight to voicemail. Now, I don't consider myself an anxious person, but in that moment, something in the pit of my stomach shifted. It wasn't fear, but it was discomfort, uncertainty. The kind of feeling that hits when you realize something you hadn't noticed before is suddenly staring you in the face. I paced around the house, my mind racing with possibilities. Was she with a friend? Had something happened? Why didn't she answer? And then, at 8:15 p.m., the door creaked open. It was Clara, but there was something off. Her face was slightly flushed, like she'd been outside for a long time. And her hair, usually so neatly styled, was messier than I had ever seen it. But it wasn't the appearance that caught my attention. It was the air around her. There was a subtle shift in her presence. It felt guarded. "Hey," she greeted me casually, her smile strained. "Sorry I'm late. Got caught up with something." I nodded, trying to mask my concern with a smile of my own. "No worries. Dinner's almost ready. How was your day?" She paused for just a second before responding. "Busy. You know how it is." The conversation was as normal as it could be under the circumstances, but that pause, that split second when her eyes flickered just slightly before she spoke, something in that moment stood out. It was as if she was making an effort to hide something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the nagging feeling at the back of my mind only grew stronger. After dinner, Clara seemed eager to retreat to the bedroom. Normally, we'd relax together, watch TV, talk about our day, but tonight, she excused herself almost immediately. I followed her to the door of our bedroom, and she turned to face me, her eyes avoiding mine. "I'm just really tired," she said. "I think I'm going to head to bed early tonight." I didn't argue. She had been working long hours recently, and I assumed she needed the rest. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the kitchen counter, her phone, sitting there with the screen lit up. A small spark of curiosity flickered in me. It was the kind of curiosity I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe I was just overthinking everything, but the silence between us had felt too loud, too heavy. I walked over and picked up her phone, debating with myself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a weird night. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then I saw the notification. It was a text from a name I didn't recognize, an unfamiliar number. "I miss you. Can't wait to see you again soon." The words hit me like a brick. They weren't harsh or overt, but the implication was clear. My heart sank, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The message was simple enough, but it had the power to unravel everything I thought I knew. Before I could process it, my mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was this person? Why was Clara texting them like this? Was she hiding something? Was she seeing someone else? I put the phone down quickly, my hands shaking. I couldn't let her know I had seen it. Not yet. I needed to know more. I needed answers. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I decided to keep an eye on her. The next day, I waited for her to leave for work. Normally, Clara would head out early, around 7:30 a.m., but this time, I waited until she was gone. I didn't want to believe that something was wrong, but the truth is, I couldn't ignore what I had found. I took her phone again, more carefully this time. I had to know if there was more. I unlocked it, glancing over my shoulder as if someone might catch me. There were more messages, some more recent than the one I had seen the night before. The same person, this Ryan character, was texting her throughout the day. But it wasn't just the messages that caught my attention. It was the tone, the familiarity. It wasn't just an affair. It was something deeper, something far more complicated than I was ready to face. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just a husband. I was the last to know. The next few days were unbearable, but I kept up the facade. Clara came and went, just like she always did, but everything felt different. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the outside looking in, and the more I tried to act normal, the more the tension built inside me. It was a strange kind of silence, one that wasn't spoken aloud, but it lingered between us like an invisible barrier I couldn't cross. Her phone stayed hidden. Every time I saw her with it, she was quick to put it away, almost like she was guarding it from me. The more I noticed her doing this, the more the knot in my stomach tightened. If there was nothing to hide, why the secrecy? Why was she so careful about what I could and couldn't see? I tried to convince myself that I was just paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was happening. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there were so many little details that didn't add up. Her late-night phone calls, the subtle evasions, the way she seemed more distant, both emotionally and physically. I couldn't even remember the last time we had a conversation that didn't feel forced. On the fifth day, I decided to take a risk. I couldn't go on like this, not knowing, not understanding what was really happening behind my back. I waited until Clara left for work, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched the house. Every room, every drawer, every corner. My hands moved quickly, almost frantic, as if I was searching for a clue, for a piece of evidence that would make sense of the chaos in my head. I rifled through the drawers in the kitchen, checked the bottom of her purse, and even opened the cabinet where we kept our cleaning supplies. I knew it was a desperate move, but I had to know. In the back of the closet, buried under a pile of old shoes, I found what I was looking for. A small, crumpled envelope. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, and it looked like it had been tucked away, forgotten. But when I opened it, my heart dropped. Inside was a receipt for a hotel booking. The name on the reservation wasn't Clara's. It was a man's name, Ryan. The same Ryan I'd seen in her text messages. The same one who had been sending her those flirtatious, intimate texts. The date of the booking was for last weekend, the weekend I had been away on a business trip. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the receipt shaking in my hand. The room spun around me, and I could feel the walls closing in. Every question I had been asking myself for days suddenly had an answer, and it wasn't one I was ready to accept. My wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had been seeing someone else. Someone who wasn't just a friend or a casual acquaintance. No, this was something deeper, something real. I stuffed the receipt back into my pocket, my mind racing. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this fester any longer. But a part of me hesitated. What would I say? How would I even begin to ask the questions that were now consuming me? I knew I was about to open a door I couldn't close. Once I confronted her, there would be no going back. The image of my wife, the woman I thought was mine, would shatter, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But I also knew I couldn't live in the dark anymore. The silence between us had become unbearable. It had already stolen too much of me. So, I waited for her to come home. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew the truth had to come out. When Clara walked through the door that evening, I could tell something was different. Her eyes seemed heavy, and there was a tightness in her voice when she greeted me. As soon as I saw her, I felt the surge of adrenaline, the fear, and the anger mixing together inside me. But I held it in. I couldn't lose control, not yet. I took a deep breath. "Clara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." Her face immediately shifted. It was subtle, but I saw it, a flicker of fear. "About what?" she asked, her voice too calm, too controlled. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled the crumpled receipt from my pocket and placed it on the table in front of her. I watched as her eyes fell on it, her expression slowly changing from casual to something far more guarded. "Ryan," I said, my voice low. "Who is he? And why were you at a hotel with him last weekend?" Her face went pale. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, almost as if the words were being dragged out of her, she spoke. "Jonah, She stopped, her hands trembling. "It's not what you think." I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Then explain it to me." Because right now, I'm not sure I want to hear any more lies. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was something in them I hadn't seen before. It was as if she was no longer the woman I married, the one I thought I knew. She looked distant, almost like she had already checked out of this relationship a long time ago. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted you to find out like this, Jonah. But there's no easy way to explain it. I felt my chest tighten. Then tell me the truth. Don't hold back. Clara stared at the table for a long moment, the silence between us thick with tension. Finally, she spoke, and what she said next shattered everything. I've been seeing Ryan for months now, she said quietly. It started as something small, but it turned into something bigger than I ever expected. And now, I don't know how to get out of it. I don't know how to fix what I've broken. Her words hit me like a wave, overwhelming and crushing. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, was slipping away from me. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, and for the first time, I had no idea where I stood. Clara's gaze dropped, and I felt the weight of the truth settling over me. The silence between us stretched on, each second dragging by like an eternity. But the most painful part? I knew this was just the beginning, and I had no idea how far this rabbit hole would go. Clara's admission left me in a state of numb disbelief. I stood there, frozen, staring at the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else. The walls I had built around my perception of our life were crumbling, and I couldn't stop them. There was no safe place left for me. The very foundation of our marriage had been shattered by her words, and everything that had once seemed so secure now felt fragile, like glass ready to break. I didn't mean for this to happen, Clara repeated, her voice shaky, barely above a whisper. She seemed lost, her hands trembling as they rested on the edge of the table. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out, to demand answers for every minute I had wasted, every moment I had been blind to her betrayal. But somehow I couldn't. Instead, I felt like I was sinking, drowning in a sea of confusion. Every question I asked in my head had an answer I wasn't ready to hear. Why? I finally asked, my voice cracking as the words left me. Why him? Why did you do this to me, Clara? She closed her eyes, as if the weight of my question was too much to bear. It wasn't about you, Jonah, she said, her voice distant, detached. It's complicated. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know how it got this far, but I couldn't stop it. I took a step back, my mind racing. What did she mean by that? What was she saying? How had it gotten this far? For months, I had been standing in the dark, thinking everything was fine, while she was living a double life. And now, as the pieces of our reality fell apart, I found myself struggling to breathe, to even grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding before me. I couldn't just let her off the hook. No, this wasn't something I could forgive or forget. I needed to know everything. All the details. I needed the full truth, even if it hurt. Because one thing I knew for certain, she had already torn apart my world. So what happens now? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. It felt hollow, detached, like I was watching myself ask the question from some far-off place. Are you going to leave me for him? The silence between us stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. I could see the way Clara flinched at my question, the way her lips trembled as she opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Then, finally, she spoke, but it wasn't the answer I was hoping for. I don't know what to do, Jonah. I really don't. I feel like I'm stuck in this mess I created, and I can't find my way out of it. Her confession didn't ease the storm inside me. It only made it worse. It was as though every moment I had trusted her, every part of our life that I thought was real, had been a lie. I had believed in her, in us. And now, I didn't even recognize the woman standing in front of me. I turned away, pacing across the room, trying to make sense of the chaos that had been unleashed. My mind was spinning, the memories of our time together playing in my head like a broken film reel. How had I missed all the signs? How could I have been so blind to her distance, to the late nights, to the secrecy? When I stopped pacing and turned back to Clara, I was shaking, not just from anger, but from something deeper, fear. Fear that I didn't know who she was anymore. Fear that the life I had built with her was nothing but a fragile illusion. You owe me the truth, Clara, I said, my voice quieter now, but with an intensity that surprised me. Everything. I need to know what's been going on. How long has this been happening? Clara hesitated, her face a mixture of guilt and uncertainty. A few months, she admitted finally. It started innocently enough, Jonah. Just texting, chatting here and there. But it quickly became something more. I didn't plan for it to get out of control, but it did. And now I don't know what to do. I felt a chill run down my spine. A few months. It had been going on for that long, hidden right under my nose. Every day, I had gone on as if everything was fine, not realizing that the woman I loved had been unraveling, slipping away from me. The person I thought I was sharing my life with was living a separate reality, a reality with someone else. But even as I stood there, reeling from the shock, a small part of me wasn't entirely surprised. There had been a change in Clara, a distance, a shift. I had seen it, sensed it, but I hadn't known how to address it. I had ignored the subtle signs, thinking they were just my imagination. But now, the truth was impossible to deny. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I don't know you, Clara. Not the way I thought I did. The pain in her eyes was real, but it wasn't enough to make me feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't want to hurt you. Her apology felt hollow, like a band-aid on a wound that was too deep to heal. How could she expect me to just forgive her? How could she expect me to believe that she hadn't meant for any of this to happen when the evidence was right in front of me? I looked at her one last time, searching her face for any sign of the woman I had once loved. But all I saw was a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, I said, my voice shaking with the weight of the words. But I need to figure out what to do next. I need some space. Clara nodded, her face pale and resigned. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could fix the brokenness between us. As I walked out of the room, I felt like I was walking away from everything I knew. But I didn't know how to stay, not with the truth between us like this. I couldn't undo what had already been done. And now, I had to figure out how to survive the fallout. But the worst part? This was just the beginning. There was still so much I didn't know. And with every new question, I feared the answers would hurt even more. The days that followed were unbearable in a way I couldn't describe. Clara and I barely spoke. Every word between us felt like it was coated in a layer of distance. Each conversation a thin veneer of civility, hiding the chaos beneath. She was still living in the house, but it felt like we were two strangers occupying the same space. The silence that had grown between us was louder than any argument we could have had. I couldn't sleep. I spent the nights tossing and turning, the images of her and Ryan, the man I knew so little about, replaying in my head over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, the same thought haunted me. How long had this been going on? How many times had I stood next to her, hugged her, kissed her, not knowing that she was hiding something so monumental? At first, I thought I could just get through it, let the storm pass, and we could return to some semblance of normal. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that wasn't going to happen. There was no returning. Our relationship was broken, irreparably shattered by the truth I couldn't ignore. But what was I supposed to do now? I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I had questions. And Clara, despite her earlier confession, was still holding back. I could see it in her eyes. There was something she wasn't telling me. I had to know the full story, no matter how much it hurt. But how do you confront someone who's already admitted their betrayal, yet still seems to be hiding something? One evening, I couldn't take it any longer. I had to ask the questions that had been gnawing at me, the ones that I couldn't escape no matter how much I tried. I was pacing in the living room when Clara came downstairs, looking as worn out as I felt. She had a tired look in her eyes, the kind you get when you're trying to keep up appearances, when you're pretending everything is fine, even though it's not. She glanced at me, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. I didn't waste time. Clara, I began, my voice low but firm. I need you to tell me everything. No more secrets. Who is he really? And why did you lie to me for so long? She froze for a moment, her hand still on the railing of the stairs, her eyes briefly closing as if she were steeling herself for what was about to come. She had already admitted to the affair, but it wasn't just the affair that I was concerned about anymore. There were layers to this that hadn't been uncovered yet, and I needed answers. Jonah, I swear, I never wanted this to go as far as it did, Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. She walked over to the couch and sat down, running her fingers through her hair in frustration. It started innocently enough. Just texting and talking. Ryan and he understood me in a way that you didn't, or at least, that's how it felt. She paused, and I could see her trying to find the right words, the words that might make it all seem less painful. Don't give me that. I snapped, my patience running thin. You don't fall into something like this innocently. There's always a choice. Why him, Clara? Why did you choose him? Her eyes flickered to mine, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something I hadn't seen before. Regret, guilt, maybe even shame. But then, it disappeared, replaced by the same guarded look that had been there for the past few weeks. I don't know, Jonah. It was complicated. We started talking about things that I didn't feel like I could talk to you about anymore. You were always so focused on work, and I felt so alone. I felt like I was just going through the motions in our marriage. She sighed, the sound heavy with emotion. Ryan listened. He made me feel seen again, like I mattered. I took a step back, trying to process what she was saying. There was a part of me that understood what she meant. I had been busy, distracted with work, and the reality was that we had drifted apart over the years. But hearing her admit that she had sought comfort in someone else, that she had turned to another man, was like a knife in my chest. So this was all my fault then? I asked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I was angry, but also broken. There was no clear line between where my anger ended and my sadness began. It was all one big, messy blur. No, Jonah. It's not your fault, she said quickly, her voice cracking. It's just, I wasn't strong enough to handle it. I should have come to you, but I didn't. I made a mistake. A huge one. She wiped her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. But the thing is, I didn't want to hurt you. I swear to you, I never wanted you to find out this way. I stood there in silence, processing the weight of her words. She was sorry, but her apology didn't feel real anymore. How could it? The trust had been broken in a way that couldn't be fixed with just words. And even if she was sorry, could I ever believe her again? Could we ever go back to what we were before all of this? I can't just move on, Clara, I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. This is too big. You don't just get to say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. You can't just undo what you've done. And I can't forget what I know now. She nodded, her eyes downcast, her lips trembling. I know. I understand. We sat in silence, the weight of everything hanging heavy in the room. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, to demand that she fix us, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew that nothing could fix this. After a few moments, Clara stood up and walked toward the door. I watched her, my chest tight, as she stopped in the doorway, turning back to look at me one last time. I'm sorry, Jonah, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I really am. But as she walked out of the room, I felt the cold reality set in. Clara wasn't the woman I married anymore. She was a stranger, and I was a man trapped in a house full of memories, trying to figure out how to survive when everything had already fallen apart. What was I supposed to do next? How do you rebuild trust when it's already been shattered beyond repair? The questions swirled around in my mind, and with each passing second, I felt further from the man I used to be. The man who believed in love. The man who believed in her. The truth was out, but the consequences had only just begun. The night after Clara left the living room, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The words she had said to me echoed in the darkness, and each time I heard them, they sounded colder, more distant. I didn't want to hurt you. It was the same line she kept repeating, as if it could somehow make the situation better, as if it could erase the betrayal that had already carved its place into our lives. I thought back to the beginning, to the time when everything felt so easy between us. I remembered the way Clara's smile had been the brightest part of my day, how we used to talk about everything. We used to share our deepest thoughts, our hopes, our fears. But somewhere along the way, it all changed. We had both been so caught up in the demands of life, work, responsibilities, our separate routines, that we'd forgotten what mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that's where it all went wrong. But even as I thought back to those times, there was something else gnawing at me, something that didn't make sense. Clara had been so quick to apologize, so quick to admit to her affair, but there was more. There had to be. She kept talking about Ryan, about how he made her feel seen again. But something in the way she spoke about him made it seem like there was something more, something I couldn't grasp. She had been emotionally drawn to him. Yes, but how much deeper did it go? Was it just a fling, a momentary lapse? Or was there something she was hiding, something she wasn't telling me? The thought of Ryan kept me up all night. I didn't know him, didn't know anything about him. But there was one thing I was sure of. He wasn't some passing figure in her life. No, he was someone important to her, someone who had taken the place that used to be mine. And that realization hit me harder than anything else. She had replaced me, not just physically, but emotionally. I had become a bystander in my own marriage, a silent observer of a love that was no longer mine. I couldn't just sit there and let it fester. I needed answers. I needed to confront the full reality of the situation, and I needed to do it now. I couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, Clara was already gone. She left early, just like she always did, leaving behind only the faint trace of her presence. An empty coffee cup, a dish left in the sink. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the place where she had sat the night before, the air between us still thick with tension. The questions I had been holding in for so long burned at the back of my throat, but I didn't know how to ask them. What was I supposed to say? How could I even begin to approach her after everything? But I had no choice. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. The truth had been exposed, and now it was time to face it. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called her work. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity, and when Clara finally picked up, I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Jonah," she asked, her voice strained. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, my grip tightening around the phone. I had to stay calm, but the anger and confusion bubbling inside me were hard to control. "We need to talk, Clara, about everything. You're not getting away with this anymore. I need to know the truth, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a brief moment, I thought she was going to hang up on me. But she didn't. Instead, her voice came through, quieter this time, more cautious. "Jonah, I don't think I can do this right now. I'm at work, and we've already talked." "No, Clara," I interrupted, the words coming out harsher than I intended. "You've talked, but you haven't told me everything. You keep skirting around it. I need to know who Ryan really is. I need to know what else you're hiding from me. You owe me that much." There was another long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and I knew that she was weighing whether or not to give in. She had been caught, and she knew it. But even then, I could feel the wall between us, the hesitation in her voice as she tried to figure out how to explain herself. "Jonah, please, let's just wait until I get home. We can talk then, please." I could tell she was trying to calm me down, trying to buy herself time, but I wasn't having it. Not anymore. I had waited long enough, and I wasn't going to let this drag on. "No, Clara," I said firmly. "You're going to tell me everything, right now. I don't care if you're at work or not. If you care about me at all, you will tell me the truth." Her silence was deafening, but I could feel her finally giving in. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "Okay, but you have to understand. He's not what you think. I never wanted you to find out like this, but I never wanted to hurt you. He's someone I met a while ago, and it turned into something I couldn't control." My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to keep the anger in check. "Clara, I need more than that. I need the whole story. What exactly is he to you? And how deep does this go?" She sighed, the sound heavy with regret. "I never thought I'd fall for him. I didn't want to, but I did. I felt things for him that I haven't felt in years. He made me feel alive again, Jonah. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. I never planned to fall in love with him, but I did. And now, I don't know how to undo it." The words hit me like a freight train. I had been prepared for the truth, but hearing it spoken aloud made everything real in a way that nothing else had. I was no longer the man who had stood beside Clara. I was just another casualty in a story I hadn't seen coming. "Clara, do you even care about me anymore?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "I do," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I always have, Jonah. But I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I don't know if I can ever be the woman you want me to be." I could feel the ground shifting beneath me, the weight of her words crushing down on me. There was no going back from this. Our marriage was over. We were over. And yet, as I hung up the phone, A part of me still clung to the hope that somehow things could be fixed. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no fixing this. And now, I had to face the storm of what came next. I hung up the phone, staring at the empty screen, my hands still trembling from the conversation. There were no answers, just more questions swirling in my mind. Clara had admitted to it all. She had fallen for Ryan, the man she'd been seeing in secret. She'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who had chosen a different path without ever giving me a chance to walk beside her. But even though she'd confessed, I still felt like I was missing something. Her words lingered in the air long after the phone call ended. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the distance between us. She had already made up her mind. Whatever connection we once shared had been replaced by something else. Someone else. But as much as Clara had confessed, there was still something about Ryan that didn't sit right with me. Her admission had left me feeling hollow, but it hadn't answered the questions that burned inside me. How had she gotten to this point? What kind of hold did Ryan have over her that made her leave everything behind? The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know more. I couldn't let this go, not when every fiber of my being was screaming at me to dig deeper. Clara had given me pieces of the puzzle, but the picture wasn't clear yet. I needed to know who this Ryan really was. Was he just some fling, some temporary escape from a marriage that had grown stagnant? Or was he something far more dangerous? I hadn't wanted to go down this path, but I had no choice. My curiosity, my need for the full truth, was stronger than any sense of dignity or respect I had left. I needed answers. I started with the basics. I knew Clara's phone was still locked in the drawer, a silent sentinel of all the things she had kept from me. But today, I wasn't going to tiptoe around. I needed to know everything. I took a deep breath and went straight to the drawer. I could hear the quiet hum of the house around me, the stillness of it all only adding to the mounting pressure in my chest. I pulled out the phone, my heart racing in anticipation. Clara had kept it locked with a password that I used to know. I didn't even hesitate as I punched in the code. It unlocked with a soft click, and I was met with the cold blue light of the screen. I couldn't believe I was doing this, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know. I scrolled through her texts, her emails, everything. Her conversations with Ryan stood out immediately, the same kind of flirtation, the same kind of intimacy that had been evident in the earlier messages I had seen. But what struck me now, more than the words, was the pattern. They weren't just texting here and there. No, it was constant. They were in touch nearly every day. And their messages weren't just about casual meetups. There were discussions about their feelings, their future. Clara had been planning a life with him, away from me. I found a series of messages that chilled me to the core. Ryan had mentioned something about planning to visit a cabin for a weekend getaway. A private place. No one else around. The dates lined up with the time Clara and I had been arguing over the past few months. I didn't even have to ask myself what that meant. I could see it. Clara had been planning this. Planning to leave, planning to start something new. And I had been oblivious, blind to the world that was being built right under my nose. The anger started to rise again, hotter this time. But it wasn't just anger. It was a feeling of betrayal so deep that it threatened to swallow me whole. I had given everything to this woman, and she had thrown it all away. She had built something with him, something that wasn't just a physical connection, but an emotional one. They were living in a world I didn't even know existed. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I didn't even recognize. I needed to confront her, to ask her about these messages, about the getaway, about the life she had been planning without me. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. She had already proven she was capable of lying to my face. How could I trust anything she said now? I sat down on the couch, trying to process everything. I felt like I was suffocating, my chest tight as I stared at the phone in my hand. Clara wasn't just someone who had made a mistake. No, this was a calculated decision. She had made a choice. And Ryan? He wasn't just some guy. He was a threat, a presence in our life that I hadn't even seen coming. I had been so focused on my own distractions that I had missed the signs. The next time I saw Clara, I wouldn't just ask questions. I would demand answers. She had already taken everything from me. Now I was going to take back whatever I could. The night dragged on, and I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara's face, the look of guilt in her eyes. But it wasn't just guilt. It was something else, something I couldn't quite place. I couldn't tell if she was sorry for what she had done, or if she was sorry because she had been caught. Either way, It didn't matter. The next morning, Clara came home earlier than usual, probably sensing the tension in the house. She walked in, her eyes immediately finding mine. I could see the hesitation in her step, the way she almost looked like she was bracing for something. I had never felt so much power and helplessness in the same moment. "Jonah," she started, her voice weak, but I cut her off before she could go any further. "No more games, Clara. I know about the cabin. I know about the plans with Ryan. Whatever this is between us, it's over. I'm done pretending everything is fine." Her face paled, and for the first time since this all began, I saw fear in her eyes. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to justify what had been happening behind my back. She had already made her choice. But now, so had I. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she whispered, but her voice was barely audible, as if she were already surrendering. "It doesn't matter," I replied, my voice cold, devoid of the anger that had consumed me earlier. "You've made your choice, Clara. You've made it clear. And now, I'm making mine." I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. The weight of everything that had happened was too much, too overwhelming. I needed space. I needed time to process the truth, to figure out what came next. But deep down I knew. This was the end of us. There was no turning back. Clara was already gone, and Ryan had already taken the place I had once held in her heart. The only thing left now was to find a way to survive the fallout. Days passed, and everything felt like a blur. I went through the motions of life, but nothing felt real. The house was quieter now, the silence suffocating, with Clara barely speaking to me, and me pretending I didn't feel the weight of her absence in every corner. It wasn't just the absence of her physically, it was the emotional distance that had grown between us, the quiet realization that everything we had built was built on something false. I spent my days at work, going through my usual routine, but it felt meaningless. The office, the meetings, the small talk with colleagues, it all felt like a distraction from the gaping hole in my life. The weight of the situation with Clara kept pressing on me, and I couldn't get rid of the images in my mind, of her with Ryan, of their secret world, of the life they were building behind my back. I had already confronted her once, but I knew there was more to uncover. I wasn't done. She hadn't even tried to reach out after the phone call where I had told her it was over. I suppose I had expected that, after all, she had already chosen him. But I didn't know how to move forward from here. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. I needed clarity, closure. But it was clear to me now. Clara wasn't going to give me that unless I forced her to. And then one night, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the mess of emotions I couldn't make sense of, Clara came home early. It was unusual, and instantly, I could feel something shift in the air. The tension that had been building between us for weeks was about to reach its breaking point. She stood in the doorway, looking at me, almost as if waiting for me to speak. But this time, I didn't wait for her to break the silence. I was done with that. I had waited long enough for her to come clean, and she hadn't. This time, I was going to take control. "Clara," I said, my voice low but steady. "We need to talk. Right now. And this time, you're going to tell me everything." She winced, almost as if she expected it, but she didn't move. I saw the way her body tensed, her eyes flickering toward the door, like she was already preparing to leave again. I wasn't going to let that happen. "No more running, Clara. This is it. This is your last chance to tell me the truth." I stood up and walked toward her, my voice firm now, not angry, but resolute. "I know there's more. I know it. I'm not leaving here until you tell me what's really been going on." She flinched slightly, her hand gripping the doorframe. The look in her eyes wasn't one of defiance anymore. It was something different. Fear? Guilt? A mix of both. She knew I was onto her, and it was finally sinking in. But even then, I could tell she wasn't ready to face what she had done. Not fully. "I've already told you everything, Jonah," she said, her voice cracking a little, but still trying to maintain control. "I don't know what more you want from me." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm even though everything inside me was screaming. I had to get to the heart of it. I had to rip through the lies, the half-truths, and find the one thing that could make sense of all this madness. "I want the truth, Clara. All of it. I know about the cabin. I know about the weekend plans with Ryan. Why did you plan that behind my back? What the hell were you thinking?" I took a step closer, forcing her to look at me. Her eyes darted away, and I could tell that she was struggling to hold herself together. I could feel the weight of her secrets bearing down on both of us. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. It was as if she was trying to decide how much of her soul she was willing to give up to me. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jonah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I was lost. So lost. I couldn't talk to you anymore. It wasn't just Ryan. It was me. I had been shutting you out for months, and I couldn't figure out how to get back. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. And then I met him." I let her words sink in. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the physical betrayal. She was admitting something deeper, something that cut to the core of who we were. She wasn't just distancing herself from me emotionally. She had already made the decision to give up on us. Ryan had become a lifeline for her, someone she could lean on when she felt disconnected from everything, from me. "I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to leave you," she continued, tears welling in her eyes. "But I did. And I don't even know why it happened the way it did. I wanted to stay. I wanted to fight for us, but it felt like too much. And then, when Ryan came into my life, I let go. I let myself fall." Her admission hit me like a ton of bricks. For months, I had been trying to make sense of her actions, of the way she had slipped away from me without warning. But hearing it from her now, hearing her admit that she had given up on us completely, it made me realize just how far gone we were. "You've already made your choice, Clara," I said, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. I could feel the anger rising again, but this time, it wasn't just anger. It was pain, the kind of pain that cuts deep and doesn't let go. "You chose him. And now, I have to deal with that. I don't know how to fix this, and I don't know if I even want to try anymore. You've already taken everything from me, haven't you?" She shook her head, the tears falling freely now. "No, Jonah, please. I didn't want to take anything from you. I just didn't know how to be the person you wanted me to be anymore." I turned away, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. There were no more words left to say. She had given me everything, her truth, her pain, her regret, but none of it changed what had already happened. None of it changed the fact that we were done. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice strained. "We're not the same people we were, and we're never going to be again." I walked away from her then, knowing there was nothing left to fix, nothing left to salvage. I had heard her confessions, her apologies, but the truth had already been revealed. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was over. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the lies. It was realizing that the woman I had loved for so long was already gone, and I had no idea who she had become in her place. I didn't have the strength to fix it. I didn't have the strength to keep pretending it could work. It was time to let go. And as I walked away, I knew that this was the beginning of the end of everything we had built. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of moments where I was trying to process, trying to understand the mess I had found myself in. But slowly, a shift began to happen. The anger I had held on to, the bitterness, began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet acceptance that I had no control over what had happened. Clara had made her choices, and while they hurt me deeply, I couldn't keep holding on to the past, no matter how much I wanted to. I spent days thinking, reflecting, and questioning every decision I had ever made. But somewhere in all that chaos, I realized something important. I was still here. I was still breathing. I still had a future ahead of me. It wasn't the future I had imagined, but that didn't mean it couldn't be a good one. It was hard at first. There were moments when the pain of everything would hit me like a wave, but I knew it would pass. I wasn't the man who had been blindsided by betrayal anymore. I was the man who had learned the value of moving on, of letting go of something that was never meant to be. I had come to understand that sometimes the hardest part isn't accepting that things fall apart, but accepting that it's okay to let them. Weeks later, Clara and I sat down again. This time, it wasn't a confrontation. There were no accusations, no anger. It was just the two of us, talking like two people who had once loved each other, and maybe could still have a friendship someday. I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. I had learned that carrying around the weight of resentment only weighed me down further. "I'm sorry, Jonah," she said, her voice quieter now, but the sincerity behind it was real. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to fix it, but I understand now that I should have tried harder." I nodded, a soft smile tugging at my lips. "I know, Clara. And I'm sorry too. I didn't see the signs, and I ignored the things that mattered." but I think we both know that we're better off apart now." She smiled through her tears, and we sat there for a moment, each processing what had happened and where we both stood now. There were no promises of reconciliation, no hope of things going back to what they were. But there was peace in that moment, a peace that came from the acceptance of what had happened and what needed to happen for both of us to move on. It wasn't the end of a story I had envisioned, but it was a new chapter. A chapter where I would take the lessons I had learned, the resilience, the strength to rebuild, and use them to shape a future of my own. I wasn't going to let my past define me anymore. As the months went by, I found myself rediscovering parts of myself I had forgotten. I reconnected with old friends, started picking up hobbies I had neglected, and even began to travel, something I had always wanted to do but never made the time for. There were still tough days, of course, but they became fewer as I learned to embrace the possibilities ahead. And then, one evening, while I was out having dinner with a group of friends, I met her. Her name was Lily. She had a laugh that was infectious, and her smile made everything around us seem brighter. She wasn't like Clara. She wasn't a replacement, and I didn't expect her to be. But what I did feel was something simple, something pure, connection. We talked for hours, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the spark of excitement in my chest, the kind of excitement I had forgotten could exist. It wasn't about filling the hole that Clara had left behind. It was about opening myself up to new experiences, to new possibilities. It was about realizing that I was still worthy of love, and that I could still be happy. As I left that evening, walking to my car with Lily's number in my pocket, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The past was behind me, and with it, all the pain that came with it. What mattered now was the future, and I was ready for it. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk. And this time, I was walking with my head held high, confident that the best was yet to come.